Thank you very much, Bernie, and great to be here. And it's exciting to be living in a world-class city and to be working in a world-class city. And part of the challenge too, I mean, Edmonton has been a leader in so many areas. Like look what we're doing with waste management for the last 30 years. And getting to a point soon where there'll be nothing going into the waste stream. And it's fantastic. So we're not just innovating with technology, but we're innovating with so many parts of our business. Ravi Nareen is here with me. He is the human manifestation of my presentation. So what that means is I've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, some links. Ravi's going to throw some stuff up on the screen. And we're doing our presentation from the cloud because that's possible. So big data and its role in transforming organizations. I'll tell you that we haven't figured out big data 100%. I mean, there's a lot of areas where we're doing BI and data analytics very well, but we're still in that journey with all of you. And it's a very exciting space and place to be. And so from my perspective, organizations are transformed because people choose a new path. And people sometimes can be like water, finds the easiest way out. And leaders lead and guide themselves and their people and their organizations as they navigate a new path. And as you all know, the world's changed. How many people remember back to 2008 and the financial crisis? Okay, as much as that may have been about the US housing market, I also think it was about leadership in organizations. And I think it was the organizations and the organisms responding to what was happening or not happening. And really, I think since then, we've seen a huge transformation. Back then, it was people telling people what to do. At the same time, now what we're seeing is people wanting to be part of, wanting to engage. And as I remind people, the power of social media, look what the people have done in Northern Africa. And Egypt crowdsourced a new government and a few other countries. So very powerful tools. So let me take you back to the 80s, if you remember the 80s. And anybody spend any time in New York in the 80s? Safe place, not a safe place, not a real safe place. Who has seen the show The District, played on TV in the early 2000s? So The District was a show that was about what happened in New York in the late 80s and early 1990s. There was a fellow by the name of Jack Maple. He started out in New York in transit, and his focus was on safety. And what they were discovering was there was a lot of safety issues on the subway in New York, and the best way to figure out what the problem was to do big data or business intelligence. But back in the 80s, like nobody was talking about big data. But people were using the power of spatial data, and what they did was they actually mapped the incidents where people were being hurt and injured, and then they also correlated that with where the police were patrolling. And guess what they found? The police didn't want to go to the places where it was dangerous. So they had to make some changes there, right? And so that created a whole system called Compstat. And the show, The District, was all about Compstat. If you remember The District, the show, they'd have all these spatial data stuff, you know, kind of like if you watch you know, those shows now, NCI and all those police shows, they've got all that fantastic technology that doesn't exist. You know, they wave their hand and stuff happens. It's like all the technology we have today was invented by Star Trek, right? And so The District was trying to articulate that story. Now, Jack Maple was very successful there as the deputy police commissioner, and he went on to work with Martin O'Malley in the city of Baltimore. And Martin O'Malley had a challenge in the early 2000s, and that was they had hundreds of deaths, drug-related deaths and other homicides. And O'Malley brought Maple to Baltimore soon after he was elected, and he said, help me the same way that you helped New York. And what Maple said was, don't just do this analytics for policing, do it for all of municipal government. And so they did. And they created something called CityStat. And really what that was about was taking all the data, all the information, and understanding the service delivery. And then they did, so you know, you're talking about big data, and I guess the point is it's been around for some time. And what they did in Baltimore was they didn't just analyze the data, but they used that information to keep track of the services that were delivered to citizens. And not just keep track of it, but also hold people to account. So too many times in our organizations, we have information and we don't use it to help people be successful. Bernie and I were talking earlier about the Steve Jobs biography, and I'm halfway through it, so don't tell me how it ends. I mean, I know how it ends, but Walter Isaacson has come out in the Harvard Business Review recently with 15 leadership principles based on what Steve did. And fascinating, you know, he lived in a 2-story house in Palo Alto, and Bill Gates lives in the 66,000 square foot house in Seattle. Jobs had never had any security, and he lived a very simple life from that perspective, but very complicated because he brought all of these tools to us. And so in Baltimore, they created the CityStat, and it was all about data and data analytics and service delivery. And then O'Malley went on to be the governor of the state of Maryland. And so what did he do? He created StateStat. He took the same ideas and applied it at a state level. So big data, there's all kinds of information. And part of our challenge as leaders is to figure out how to use the data and how to apply it to what we're doing, the decisions that we're making. But there's transitions happening in the industry. A year ago, nobody was really saying big data as much as they are today. We were saying data analytics. For years, we've been talking about BI. They're all the same thing. And it's not a new concept. It's really a global movement. I was in Singapore last week presenting at a conference there, and the focus was government. Of course, they just have one level of government there. But there was a whole track on data analytics. And the fact is that in government, there's a lot of data. And this connects to what Bernie was saying earlier about our open data a few years back. Does anybody know Master Mac, our preeminent blogger? If you don't know him, check him out. He has a full-time job, does other stuff, and then blogs about other things on the side. The great thing about Mac is he loves this city, much like many of you do. And he does things related to the city just because he's intrinsically motivated. But a few years ago, Mac came to me and he said, "Hey, Chris, you know, you're the government. It's about public and open and transparent. Why don't you just release all of your data?" And I said, "Okay, well, can't release it all because we've got a bunch of private information, and people will get upset about that. Besides, it's probably against, you know, some privacy laws." But I said, let's look at what we can provide. And there's a lot of information that we collect on citizens' behalf that, you know, you could go around and discover that information, but if we can put it in a machine-readable format, it's just so much more helpful. I'm going to get to that later. But in Singapore last week, I discovered this company called Splunk, and I would encourage you to check it out. It's about data visualization. Here's our challenge right now. We've moved from the big enterprise systems to data and applications. And people have devices, and you know, how many apps do you have? I heard the average person has like 30 or 40 apps. I counted up, I got like 64. I'm thinking, okay, I have like an app addiction. But I'm kind of frugal, so I only have a few apps that I bought. I like the free apps, and there's a lot of free apps. But there's so many places to collect data from, and so many tools to use to analyze the data. And there's so much data in our lives, in our personal lives, in our corporate lives. And one of the things that's really impressed me over the last couple of years is just coming to understand what people are all about. And you know, you're in government, private sector, you're involved in technology. At the end of the day, it's all about people, because people make things happen. And people are really sense-making beings. So you're a sense-making being. You hear a change coming, you just want to make sense about it. And you know what happens when you don't have the context for the change? You start to make stuff up because you just want to make sense. And typically, people make stuff up pathologically. So you hear, you know, there's some rumblings in your organization, there's some change, and then you start going, oh no, what does that mean for me and my team? And you know, and I would really encourage you, because you're all sense-making beings, is try to think about what could be positive, what positive things could happen, because you've probably heard sometimes when there's change, and then you're surprised by it because it's positive. But as sense-making beings, we're grabbing all this information and trying to make sense of it. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for our team? What does it mean for our organization? And as you know, I mean, we're beyond information overload. We were talking about information overload in the 90s. Like we're beyond it. You know, we're beyond drinking from the fire hose. So how do you keep track of everything? And on top of that, then there's social media. And some people go, oh, I don't do Twittering. I don't know what tweeting is all about. I'm not even on Facebook. My kids do that. And there's a whole other stream of activity. And Perry emailed me earlier, said, hey, Chris, you're going to be here later? And I said, absolutely. I'll be there. But I was keeping track of what was going on here because I was following the hashtag of ABDC 12. And I saw some of the things people were saying and retweeting. So you can actually be participating in something and not even being present. At the Mayor's State of the City address yesterday, I was really impressed by the EEDC. I even tweeted at the end of the event, thank you EEDC, because they had the screen and the mayor's stuff and videos rolling at the bottom. They had this little Twitter hashtag thing going on. It was great.
It was the chamber.
Oh, sorry, Bernie, it was the chamber. Okay. So later tonight, I'll send a tweet to the chamber and thank the chamber. Thank you.
Past chair.
Yes, yeah, you would know. And what that did, and the mayor's talking, other people are presenting, but it allowed everybody in the room to engage in the conversation, and then also people who weren't in the room to engage in the conversation. And I don't know, I learned something exciting there. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff the mayor talked about, but on May 8th, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra is in New York at Carnegie Hall playing, and there's like 1,100 people going from Edmonton. Do you know that's like over $1 million for all those people to travel and stay one night? Such huge. So all this information's coming to us. At the city, I'd like to say that we've been analyzing data for 107 years, because that's how long we've been around. And for us, BI is definitely one strategy that we're using to optimize our operations. I think the best example of that is our Office of Traffic and Safety. You may drive around and say, oh man, it's a dangerous place. Ravi and I were coming here earlier and somebody almost ran into us, and we're thinking, okay, why is that person driving? Like, he's not seeing what's happening around him, right? And so every once in a while there's collisions here, vehicle collisions, people, that happens. And our Office of Traffic and Safety, working with the police and working with the university, have been very focused on making Edmonton a safer place to walk, ride your bike, ride your car, ride the bus, for goods to travel throughout the city. And they collect huge amounts of data. And for years they've been doing that. And I saw a presentation from Jerry Shimko, who heads that group up, at our executive team about a month ago. It's fascinating how they have been able to make Edmonton a safer place because they've been collecting and analyzing the data, and not just that, but they've been changing the design of intersections because of the analytics and the information. And so that translates into fewer fatalities and saved lives. And for them, it also translated, recently they presented to council in about $203 million in cost avoidance through all that, through insurance and different things. So if you're living in a city where the city administration understands the value of business intelligence and big data. Bernie talked a bit about our smarter cities, and we were really pleased to be able to work with IBM last year and have a team from around the world help us. Our focus there was on safety. We really wanted something that was going to connect with the public, and they came back with a number of recommendations around governance and social media, but also on our big data. And that report's available on our website. Just down to the next one, the open data story. So I talk a bit about open data, and that this is big data. Just go back one. Yeah, thanks. No, the other one, the catalog. Yeah. So we've got a lot of data. And we've actually got a lot of systems. We've got over 1,100 systems that we use to run the city. And so we've got 1,100 places where we store data. And the challenge is sometimes getting that data to interact with other business systems and to be able to function properly. So a couple years ago, based on the encouragement and the sponsorship of Councillor Don Iveson, we got into the open data space. I'd like to say that we've been in the open government space since 1905. That was long before open government was a tag phrase in the world. But we really function in an open and transparent way. And part of that in the last couple of years has been leveraging the power of open data. And not just open data, but also engaging the community around apps. And you may be in private industry right now and you're saying, oh, open data, that doesn't apply to us. Well, hang on, I'll show you shortly how it does. So open data for us was about getting our publicly available information out in the public domain in a machine readable format. When we did it 2 years ago, we were able to squeeze out 12 data sets. And you can imagine any organization, people are going, oh, I don't know if we should put the data out. I don't know if it's clean. What if somebody finds an error? And so what we do is, well, if somebody finds an error, we thank them and we say, oh, we'll clean that up. And if I was to go to the organization and say, I think we need to launch a multi-million-dollar, multi-year data cleansing exercise, they would go, we're going to buy a few fire trucks and make a playground. And so for me, strategically, open data has been about cleansing our data, our big data, and getting it out to people. So we started with 12 data sets. If you can just go back, Ravi, and just scroll up a bit. If you just go down the bottom of the page. We're at, I checked it yesterday, 155 data sets. We don't have like a policy or a directive or any laws or sticks that we're chasing people around to release the data. These are just business units within the city saying, hey, I want to get my data out there because they know it's going to be helpful to Edmontonians. One that I use on a every 8-day basis. If you live in Edmonton, you know your waste gets picked up on every 8 days, except some days, some weeks it skips, and stuff like that. And there's a couple ways to figure out whether your garbage needs to be put out. You can crowdsource it with your neighbors and go out on the street and say, oh, is it garbage day tomorrow? Right? That's crowdsourcing. They just don't know you're sourcing them. Or you can look at the sheet that we send out every year that you stick up in your kitchen or wherever. Or you can check the open data catalog. Or you can use one of the apps that was created, like Alertsy, to send you a text message the day before. So I get a text message the day before, and my goal is to always get the garbage out before I get the text message. Now you got to be careful, with animals and that kind of stuff. And so last week I'm in Singapore, and my wife remembers that it's the garbage day tomorrow, and I'm talking to her on Skype, and she said, I don't know if you have the text message or not, but don't worry about putting the garbage out. I'll take care of it this week. And then shortly after that, I got the message, right? I had totally lost track of it. So if you go back to the main screen on the open data. So when we first put a lot of the data out there, and these are examples of our big data, and people can do analysis with this. And some of the questions early on, people would say, oh, well, aren't you afraid that people are going to use the data against you in some way? They're going to analyze it differently, and you're going to say, hey, this is really what's going on. And I would say, no, we always have the source. We've always got the truth. And then other people would say, well, aren't you concerned that people are going to use your data and make an app and make money? I say, no, that's called economic development. And actually, I just heard last week, the UK government has been one of the most progressive national governments in the world around open data and apps. They figured out that the open data and all the apps that are being made are actually adding 1.7% to their national GDP. They figured that out. I can't tell you what it is for us, but I do know that there's a few people, Fuse Logic and other people that have made apps, selling for 99 cents using our data. Our data works to a standard, and we're trying to encourage more standardization. We're working with a group across the cities of Toronto and Ottawa and Vancouver with the provincial government and the federal government to create like a pan-Canadian standard around open data, so that if a software developer in Edmonton makes an app with our data and the app is the same in other parts of the country or the world, they can sell it wherever. And that's called the global economy. And I'm convinced that if Tim Hortons can make a business selling donuts and coffee, you can make a business selling apps. And all that apps accesses data. The other thing on the app, you just go back. So how many people remember our mosquito situation last year? Okay. I think I saw a mosquito the other day, and I'm concerned. For my well-being. The city has a great program around that, but it was just like crazy last year. So one of the most accessed data sets last year was our mosquito count data. Did you know that, well, you probably do because last year, but do you know we have people counting mosquitoes and traps? And they're fascinating people because they're like, they're in that like space. And not just counting the mosquitoes. Not just counting the mosquitoes, but also identifying them. And the reason why identifying them is important is because of West Nile, because there's a specific type of mosquito that carries that. So this was huge last year. And then if you go back to the main screen, so over the winter, we launched another data set. It was our tree inventory by species. So as you probably know, like we have a huge urban forest in this city. And the River Valley is like the largest conservation area in North America. 22 times larger than Central Park and all that. And so we launched our tree data, tree spec data in the winter, and it became the most visited set of data. And then, Ravi, if you can go back to the main screen again. And then about a month ago, we launched our road construction data. Well, it just took off. And it's the most popular, 5,700 unique visits. And it got a little publicity from the Edmonton Sun, which was great. But the reality is you can go there with our data catalog. Ravi's pulling it up. And you see all those blue dots. You might have to zoom in a bit. Get away from the, like, there. You can go in and see road projects that are on. So when this data was up, I took a look at it and, you know, the routes that I normally drive, and I said, okay, what's happening this year? Because I'm thinking, oh, do I, you know, if a bridge is going to be changed out, that, you know, you got to make a new plan. Because we do that every once in a while. You know, every 50 or 100 years, we change the bridges out. And I didn't see any major construction, but on my routes that I travel, I saw two really exciting things on 34th Street and 50th Street south of Whitemud. They're going to put flashing lights at the crosswalks there, and I thought, that's a really good idea. And you can go on any project, and you can pull up the project, the scope of the project manager, the cost of the project. So that's about us providing that transparency. And so big data for us is not just about the analytics that we use internally around traffic and safety to improve the safety and well-being. It's also getting our data out to people. And the usefulness of the data can come through an app, like a text message for your weekly garbage pickup, or it can come out because we just provide the data on our site, and there's some easy tools there to navigate. It's also something a couple months ago, the Edmonton Journal ran an article on pets, and they did that based on our data, our pet data. Does anybody know what the most popular dog in Edmonton is? Heinz? No? Yeah, anybody else? Shih Tzu. Based on the animals that we have record of, there's over 6,000 Shih Tzus in Edmonton. There's a lot of other dogs. And then not just the count of the dogs, but where are the dogs? And then, you know, you live in a neighborhood and you like hear dogs barking all the time. Well, if you go to the data catalog, you might find out why. There might be a lot of dogs in your neighborhood. And so think about this. You're thinking about moving to a different place, and, you know, maybe you love dogs, maybe you don't, maybe, you know, you can go on the data catalog and say, hey, what's the dog density in that community? Right? Like, when could you do that before? So these are some of the things that empower people. And all we're trying to do is get information out to people because they know, you know, they need it, and they're asking for it, and there's different ways to deliver it. So open data in this space is not just for public sector. It's for private sector as well. On the next one, Ravi, there. So if you're in the private sector space, look at what Nike's doing. They're a huge leader in this space, and they're providing a lot of their information in the open data format. And they've actually worked with some of their partners and created something called the Green Exchange. And on the next link. And they actually are putting out in the public domain IP, intellectual property, and they're exchanging intellectual property. And so I don't know if you've heard the term ecosystem or open ecosystem, but what we're trying to do is encourage and promote an open ecosystem. And for us, that's about open data, it's about open networks, it's about apps competitions, putting our data out there, allowing people to make apps against that data. And from that space, then you can co-create and you can collaborate. And so if you think about your big data for you, that's one thing. But if you start to think about the power of sharing information across organizations, our open data, one of the benefits of it, we didn't think about it when we launched it, was we were thinking really about the citizens. So we're thinking about you, taxpayers. But one of the big benefits internally was people can now get information across the organization. So in the past, if I wanted something from another department, you know, I had to follow the hierarchy up and across and down, or as a lot of people do, you know, they have like relationships with people, they buy them coffee and they say, oh, you know that data file about construction, can you send it to us so we can, you know, make some decisions on it? So now, all this data is out there, but also it's out there internally and people can see it as well. So from that perspective, you know, the future is ours to design. Big data is real and it's here and it's part of our lives. One of the things that IBM told us was, much like we have in our organizations people with project management expertise, what's going to become really common across our organizations is the ability to do analytics. And data analysis or big data is not going to be just in the big data group, but it's really going to be part of everybody's job. And so big data transforms cities. It transformed New York, Baltimore, Maryland. It's transforming the city of Edmonton. And it's not just about within the corporation, it's for citizens or for customers as well. So I'd encourage you to, you know, embrace that openness as a way of being, be curious, be innovative, and be part of making Alberta a leader in the knowledge economy, because that's a huge future and it's ours to tackle. So that's it. Do we have some time for questions? Sure. Want to do that? Okay. So any questions? Feel free, throw them out there. Yes?
I have two questions. The first one is the question I'm asking everybody, because I'm a computer scientist, so big data means something different to me. What it's just to calibrate with my first challenge would be, you don't have big data. You might have reasonable sized data, but you don't collect 840,000 gigabytes per second or something.
Yeah, no. I don't have a square mile array or anything, no.
Neither do you have a genomic sequencer.
No.
That's the first question. The second question.
But I have a lot of genomes in the organization.
The second question is actually about open data. So while sitting at an intersection that has an LRT crossing
Yep.
and a set of lights,
Yeah.
I in frustration called the city's number and decided it was probably better to offer to help than just complain.
Sure, yeah.
So I talked to someone named Brian Murphy,
Yeah.
who said, yes, we gather data, but we have no idea about how to use it because we don't literally know how to build the models of making that more efficient.
From a planning perspective,
That for
yeah.
me is an example of
Yeah.
exactly the kind of engagement we want with open data and crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
Is to help the crowd, use the crowd to build the model.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're going to see, I mean, over the years there's been different ways to do that because our organization is terribly complex. And sometimes you wonder why, you know, we clean the street, then we repave the street, and then we do something with the sewers, and right? And in the BRZs, the business redevelopment zones, we're really looking at models for integrated service delivery and understanding that as, like, in our organization, there's 5 parts of the organization that clean graffiti based on whether it's on a moving vehicle or under a bridge, and so it's helping us. And absolutely, the public has, so thanks for contributing, because there's a lot of people that just want to do that. And that's why I said, I mean, for us, this is really about business intelligence and data analytics. Big data is the buzz phrase. You know, we had to drop Y2K because that doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Standards, you were talking about Toronto, the East, Ottawa. What about St. Albert, Leduc, and Nisku, and our region? Are you developing common standards for analytics work on a regional basis?
Yeah, so we've been having that discussion, and the mayor's been very supportive of that. The Northern Alberta mayors meet on a regular basis, and we've talked to them. We've helped. You know, it's not those people, but we've helped Grand Prairie, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. So, sorry about that.
You know where I'm coming.
Yeah, and so for us right now, it's about a coalition of the willing. And does anybody fish in the room? Yeah, okay. So you fish where the fish are, correct? Right. And so for us, it's about working with the people who are in that space. I mean, we've done some stuff with Strathcona County. You know, data standards are not in the lexicon from a capital region perspective because there's other things around planning and transportation. But I think it's just a matter of time.
How can you do planning and transportation without analytics?
Yeah, well, back to the point earlier about the LRT crossing and the street, right? And so we actually do, we do a fair bit of work as well with the province of BC because they're in that space. And so for us, it's, it's part who's in the open ecosystem, who wants to work on it. Yes, sir.
Well, congratulations on being in that open data initiative. I was glad to see that. I have a comment on the question. The first comment, I come from Calgary. They pick up my garbage on the same day every week except for Christmas week. And we call that economic development because we pay the guys overtime.
Right.
So my point is that
Right.
sometimes putting this data out there can be an excuse for sloppy government practices, like having this convoluted garbage collection schedule when there is an alternative.
Yeah, and what would help is if we explained why we pick it up every 8 days.
It saves you a little money.
$1 million a year.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scheme of things, maybe that's a lot. My other one is I have a sort of open offer and take every city's open data thing to find privacy holes. And I found big ones in New York, big ones in Philadelphia. I didn't spend long on yours, but I did find in the election results
Right.
that you published the exact numbers. And here's my point. Let's say I was one of those people who wasn't Mandel and didn't get a lot of votes. And my wife was in the hospital that day. And so I can tell from the hospital poll that nobody voted for me in the hospital poll, therefore my wife didn't vote for me. Have you thought about the possibility of having, and I wrote a paper on this, have you thought about the possibility of saying not significant when those numbers are small?
Yeah, so we have, and we've also thought about and keeping track of the more data we release and the more data other people release that's related to it, that it could create a correlation at some point in time to identify. And we haven't seen that yet, but we are looking, probably trying to do some of the analytics that you're doing. Every data set that we release, we go through our city FOIP office, and that's one data set at a time. But then we're looking at the correlation or the mashing up of data, and can that or how could that identify individuals or groups. And that, I think that's a reality, and at some point in time that'll hit. When we're in the media, we want it to be about all the great stuff we're doing, and we haven't had a lot of challenges or issues yet, but it's something to be mindful of. And it's not just our data; it could be other people's data that could be related.
New York released 2,500 email addresses because they forgot to take them off the data set, so you're doing better than that.
Yeah, well, it's always a challenge on the. It's always a challenge. Yep.
Thank you, Chris. Are you even trying to measure the return on the
Yeah.
investment?
Yeah, great question. It's very difficult. And so we haven't been. Releasing data just makes sense. What I want to make sure we don't do is we don't keep charging for data, because the public have already spent money to collect it and store it. When it came to the apps competition that we did in 2010, and we did that after we released the data, and the focus of it was to create awareness around the value of the data, we resisted doing what Washington and Portland and others had done, was trying to analyze it. So Washington spent $50,000, we spent $50,000, and they believe they got over $2 million worth of value. I didn't try to figure that out because it's really hard to analyze, but what I do know is we got 34 apps, and if we would have had to make those apps, it would have taken a lot longer, and it probably would have cost more than $50,000. And so we haven't done the business case. We do business case for other, every capital project we do a business case for, but we didn't do that. And I was on the way to Singapore last week. I was in Hong Kong, and speaking to their CIO office about open data. They have open data. They released 2 data sets last year. That's great. And then one of the questions they had for me, I'm talking to Hong Kong, right? One of the questions they had for me was, how did we publicize it, and how do we get the awareness? And one of the fantastic partners that we've had that they've just done on their own has been the media outlets, and the print media is trying to figure out what their new role is. And they've taken a lot of our data and they've hosted it, they've run articles on it because there's value. So it's really hard to measure, and we haven't attempted to do that. Great.
Thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
Well received and very, very interesting. Very pleased that you were able to make it.
Great, thank you.
On behalf of the host of the conference, which is the University of Alberta School of Business, that's as Athabasca University, and Alberta Council of Technologies, we have this excellent box.
Black box.
The black one, full of data.
Yes, it is. It's full of data.
Okay.
And so don't spill it.
Let's spill it. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Great, thank you.